Shift Happens podcast.
Welcome to the Shift Happens podcast, where we explore the latest trends and technologies transforming the future of work. Today, we're joined by John Rossman, a seasoned business strategist and operator respected for his pivotal role in Amazon's early days. With a career spanning influential advisory roles at T-Mobile and the Gates Foundation, he's authored 4 books, including his most recent, Big Bet Leadership. Today, John shares his perspective on how leaders can drive business growth and navigate digital disruption. Let's get started. Welcome back to another edition of Shift Happens podcast. Today, I'm so excited to be joined by John Rossman, who has had a colorful and interesting career. And we're going to have a wonderful conversation of his life, his experiences, what he learned, but more importantly, sharing what he learned to all of us with the books he's written and with a new book. So John, welcome to Shift Happens.
Thanks for having me on Shift Happens. Nice to get to know you.
So we always start with a conversation around music because we like different things, but the common bond that connects all of us, it's either music or food. And sometimes people argue over food. So let's talk about music. So we ask everyone, this is part of our soundtrack of Shift segment. What song resonates with you most as you think about the current state of things, disruption, change, and transformation? And why did you pick that song?
Yeah. So the song I pick is the famous and song of Lose Yourself by Eminem. And I didn't write this description, but the Big Bet GPT wrote this description. And so I asked it, like, what song kind of captures the spirit and the essence of Big Bet leadership? And it answered, with its powerful narrative of seizing the moment and not letting opportunities slip, this song speaks to the urgency of making a big bet and moving with velocity. Eminem's intensity reflects the kind of focus required when you need to prioritize and take smart, calculated risks in leadership. So anyway, Lose Yourself. I love that description.
You know, that song's been out for a while, and he kind of starts with his palms are sweaty and he throws in mom spaghetti, but you're right.
Everybody's doubting him, and everything, right? But he has to proceed with confidence and with a vision and everything. Yeah, it's a great song.
And it's clear, right, that he comes from a place of, I would say, humility. Like, I don't know this. I'm scared. I'm nervous, but it's not going to stop me. I'm going to go head on, take this on, even if it's new. I'll figure it out. It may work. It may not work, but I think you're right. The key is the confidence. And while there's uncertainty, we're going to figure this out, which is where we're at today.
That's right.
So wait, you talk about Big Bet GPT. What's that about?
So with the book, Big Bet Leadership, we tried to design a very readable or listenable book. And so we offloaded a number of kind of tools that help put the book into action, right? And so with purchase of the book, you get access to a Big Bet journal, a pre-flight checklist, and we have a Big Bet GPT. So it's a specialized GPT that, while it's not as good as interacting directly with me, it's pretty great as far as a thought partner goes to help you, take this book and put it into action. And before the recording, you and I were talking about the book, and it's like I write these books so that others put them into action. And so we really worked hard at creating the follow-on tools to the book to help you do exactly that.
I'm going to quote you here. So let's work backwards, right? let's work backwards. How did you get to this point? I'm sure your career has been so rich and amazing. You were in the early days of Amazon. We're introducing the marketplace, which right now it's billions and billions of dollars of business. So maybe walk us through your career that led you to this juncture where now you're sharing your wisdom, your lessons learned, and helping a lot of leaders around the world.
Yeah. So the easy short version of that was, well, first of all, like I grew up in Portland, Oregon. I was the youngest of 4 kids. My dad worked for the state highway department. my eighth grade class voted me most likely to be a truck driver, right? There wasn't a lot of aspiration or high confidence in my family or where I came from. But what I fell in love with was like, I'm good at solving hard problems, and that's kind of been the arc of my career. But fast forward, studied engineering. I was a partner at Arthur Andersen. I got an invitation in 2001 to come up and talk to Amazon about something they were thinking about, and it was the marketplace. And so I joined Amazon in early 2002. We launched the marketplace fall 2002. I left Amazon in late 2005, so just about 4 years. And then I was a partner at a firm called Alvarez and Marcel for 12 years. And about 7 years after I left Amazon, one of my clients at the Gates Foundation, he pulled me aside and he goes, John, you do a really delicate job of applying the things, the thinking, the principles, the approaches from Amazon into our work to help make change happen, to help make shift happens, right? And he goes, I think you ought to write a book about it. And that was really the first spark of somebody going like, this is important and usable stuff. So I wrote a book called The Amazon Way about Amazon's 14 leadership principles. First edition of that in 2014. We've done 3 editions of that, translated into 13 languages. And that is kind of my story at Amazon and the leadership principles. I followed that up with a book called Think Like Amazon, 50 and a half ideas to become a digital leader. Because I was getting all these questions about, well, how would Jeff think about this? Would Amazon do that? Like, what would Jeff do? Exactly. So I wrote the book called Think Like Amazon. And those are 2 nice complementary books. Along the way, I started to get all these invitations for keynote speaking. So I kind of leaned into that. I left A&M. I'm on my own. And I got an invitation to come up and talk to T-Mobile. And the homework assignment, the problem statement that they had was like, we're a big, successful company, but we need to grow beyond our core wireless business. So I got to be the senior innovation advisor at T-Mobile for 3 years. My key client was Kevin McCaffrey. Kevin is the co-author of Big Bet Leadership. We built a specific system, rewiring a lot of the stuff from Amazon, plus some other things to help a company that didn't have this kind of innovation DNA. They are very good operators, but they don't have kind of the ideation gene in them. And so we built a new business incubation approach for them. Kevin left to go run a strategy team at Google. During the pandemic, I was kind of thinking about like, hey, what's next, and everything, right? And I started to come to this concept of companies need bolder ambition in their transformations and in their innovations. Everyone's kind of tweaking around the edges. What you need to do is rethink and reinvent. And so I wrote this proposal for Big Bet Leadership. I sent it to Kevin. He immediately calls me, which he never does because he was a very busy guy. And he goes, I've been waiting for you to do something like this. This is going to be great. And I go, hey, why don't you be the co-author with me? So Kevin is the co-author of Big Bet Leadership. And that's the fast story of how I got here, which is I deeply believe in both the operational mission of companies, but also that so many are missing kind of a reinvention approach. And what we saw was a gap in the market. And the gap in the market is for senior leaders. Everybody knows they need to innovate, they need to transform, that competitive advantage is short-lived. But senior leaders don't actually understand how is the job of transforming different than the job I do today, like my operating job. And so we tried to deliver a very practical and tactical set of ideas. Here are things that are different that you need to do when you are doing a large-scale transformation versus your daily operating job. And that's what we tried to deliver to our customer, the reader of this book.
I want to really talk more about that further. But before we do that, I want to rewind and go back to your trajectory at Amazon. So for our listeners, before Amazon Marketplace, pretty much at Amazon, you can buy books, maybe music and video, right? And music.
Yeah. Yeah. So in 2001, 90% of the business was books, music, video, and 90% of that was first party retail, meaning Amazon purchased the inventory and resold the inventory.
And at that time, it's not even streaming, it's physical books and CDs and DVDs, right? Yeah. So when you left, you wrote this book, The Amazon Way. You talked about these leadership principles. Can you share some of them that really struck a chord with you? We're not going to go through all of them, that to this day, a lot of your readers are benefiting from, and our listeners, I'm sure, would benefit from it as well.
Yeah, I'll talk about 2 right now, and then in one of the forward questions, I'll talk about 2 others. But, customer obsession, you might go, "Oh, yeah, that's kind of an easy one," and everything, right? But here's what people don't understand about customer obsession, which is most of us think about what I would call tactical customer obsession, right? How do we get today's order, today's transaction, today's project, today's delivery correct for our customer? Super important. You need to do that with high trust, high integrity, high operating integrity to it. But what most companies don't understand is what I call strategic customer obsession. Strategic customer obsession is understanding the customer experience end to end, much bigger than your product or your service may intersect with that customer. And when you have that type of curiosity about the job your customer is trying to get done, what's a good day look like? What's a bad day look like? What's the real outcome that they are looking for? That gives you ideas that are way beyond your current product space that you're typically in, but it also gives you ideas of like how to improve your product. And I think it's that strategic customer obsession that has really taken Amazon from kind of this, first party e-commerce retailer in Seattle to a global conglomerate, is because they're always thinking about the customer in a bigger way than how they intersect with them today. So that's the first one I think is people glad hand that customer centricity, but man, when you can get strategic about it and really apply the resources and the curiosity, that's the market is going to tell you where the future business is. The second is invent and simplify. So that's the third leadership principle. And what is most interesting about that principle is not the invention part of it. The most interesting part of that principle is the and simplify piece of it, right? So the path to operational effectiveness and integrity and efficiency and reinvention and operating models and cost models with differentiation is by simplifying the processes, the procedures, the requirements, the rules, the assumptions, the job descriptions, the data, like rethinking everything from kind of a zero-based design approach. And the edgiest work I get to do with big enterprises is to decalcify all of the accumulated requirements and approaches in coming up with a single best vision for how this process, this function works from the ground up. And if you can do that, you can radically reinvent both productivity for your business as well as improve the outcomes for the customer of that process.
It's like tech debt, right? In a lot of organization, yeah, it's process debt. Very similar. And the word simplifying sounds so simple, but no, it's the hardest thing to do. That's why companies like Apple are so successful.
And it forces uncomfortable conversations. Like I am telling you, like you have to be bold. You have to have this. At Amazon, we called it truth seeking. Like you have to really be committed to digging down and past the comfortable conversations and really get like, what's the value add of this step, of this job, of this requirement and everything? And most of the time people can't explain it. So I don't know if you read the book, Musk, the recent biography by Musk, but this is the essence of what's called Elon's algorithm in the book. And it's delete, delete, delete. Assume every requirement is incorrect and is wrong and build things up from the start. And that's how he approaches every requirement that so-called requirement that he comes up to is assume it's wrong. You prove to me that it's right. And that's why he's able to reinvent not just the product, but the cost model to the product.
I mean, you can see in all even just the Cybertruck. I know there's mixed feelings about the Cybertruck, but forget about how it looks. The engineering of it, like I was reading up how they did the electrical with a single cable. That's unheard of, right? And
I didn't know that story, but that is the exact essence of it. And I think that they have a 3x cost per vehicle advantage to any other electric car maker out there, right? That cost model advantage is the secret to creating great businesses.
now let's fast forward to your latest book, Big Bet Leadership. It focuses on winning in a hyper digital era. So you raise a very, very important point because I'm going through myself as a leader in a publicly traded software company where I have my business as usual, my day to day work, but there's a lot of demand for transformation. Our customers are going through this AI journey. We're helping them, making sure their data estate is in a great foundation, which also means we have to pivot and shift internally a lot of our processes with our technology. So tell us about key strategies or some highlights. I read some, I've not finished with the book yet, but can you elaborate some of these key strategies that leaders should adopt?
Yeah. So just a little definition and setup first, and then I'll get to that. So big bets get called lots of things in companies. It's a digital transformation. It's an AI strategy. It's a cost model improvement. It's an operating model redesign. It's any of those things. But what a big bet is at its essence is it has high ambition and potential for business value, but it also has many requirements, assumptions, dependencies, and unknown unknowns, right? So it's high potential, but like there's lots of risks relative to this. Well, that's very different than most incremental projects, things that we understand well. If I solve that problem, here's how I solve it, and here's generally what I'm going to get from it, right? And so the essence of the book is there's a difference between an incremental project and a big bet, and you need more big bets in your portfolio, because if all you do is incremental, the best you will do is stay competitive. You won't create new competitive advantages. So that's the essence of the book. And these things, even incremental projects, like the vast majority of them fail. They fail to deliver the value, in particular, the value that they were designed to do. So that's a wicked challenge, right? Meaning, hey, guess what? You need to do more of these things, but guess what? Most of them are going to fail. So that's what we try to solve for the reader, is a playbook to be successful. And the way you are successful at these is by maintaining the ambition, but recognizing at their heart that you have to set up a bunch of experiments in order to prove them out before you make big commitments. So the 3 habits of big bet legends, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, John Ledger from T-Mobile, Satya Nadella of Microsoft, is they do these 3 things differently than other very good operators. They create clarity first and foremost. They do not suffer from vague notions of transformations. The second thing they do is they maintain velocity. All of us start off these endeavors with commitment and yes, we're going to give it our best and everything, but they quickly slow down, start operating by the rules of how projects and programs operate, and they start behaving like a normal project. That is a recipe for success. You have to maintain, if not accelerate, velocity on them. And the third thing they do is they accelerate risk and value testing, deferring all other commitments until you've actually proven these things out far faster and far cheaper than you typically do. And that's where things typically get sideways, is people, they vaguely define a problem, they vaguely define the future state, they make a big commitment for it, and then they build it in a very incremental way. And it's not until the very end that they go, oh, this doesn't quite have the juice that we expected it to have, right? And that's why these transformations fail. So at a very high level, create clarity, maintain velocity, accelerate risk and value.
I love, especially the last 2 points, right? The creating clarity, straightforward. Everybody gets that. But you think about, again, Satya, even John Legere, were you at T-Mobile when he was there?
I was not, but we understand the uncarrier playbook extremely well. Yes.
Exactly. Like that whole model was unheard of. Satya Nadella, when he came in, he started talking about growth mindset. To this day, I think it's only really a handful of companies, including Microsoft, that's truly living it because of this idea of experiments, for example. Experiments are designed 90% of the time to fail. But this idea of failing, well, mentally we know, yeah, fail fast, fail forward, we'll learn from it. It's all lip service, right?
It is lip service, and it's also used as an excuse for sloppy execution and not having a sense of urgency, right? And so in the book, we talk about like the agile. I've seen this a lot. Maybe you've seen it, which is agile is kind of the methodology of no accountability, right? Uh, no scope commitment, no time commitment, no resource commitment. We're agile. Well, what you have to do is use agile in a constraint based manner of here's the problem that we're going to solve and here's our hypothesis for what the future state is. Test that as quickly as possible. We call that construct the big bet vector, and that is the primary framework that you have to create in order to be able to test and communicate about these things far better than we typically do.
The other part to that too is you think about these leaders, all of these leaders roll their sleeves and would actually do the work, right? They're not sitting in their, high-rise corner office. Oh, I have this idea, go do it, and then come back. No, no, they jump in the trenches with the team and pilot it and try it. I've seen John do it. Satya does it all the time. And I think that's another big difference, right?
I get asked a lot, like, what was it like working with Jeff Bezos? And what I would tell you was, at his heart, he loves solving problems. He loves rolling up his sleeve and not having it presented to him, but debating A, what's the problem? And B, how are we going to solve this problem, and everything, right? And he was great at doing that. And he would get frustrated with operators, senior operators, if they didn't understand their business as well as he could understand their business, right? And I think that's a very fair expectation of senior leaders. And so, as to your point, and Elon Musk is maybe the most visible example of a person who rolls up his sleeve and understands from first principles how a rocket works, how a car is built, how a tunnel is created. He works things from an engineering standpoint. And where so many companies have flipped the bit and lost their advantage position is that finance has gone from a supportive function to being the leading way that you create strategy is from a financially engineered mindset. And that is an indicator of a company that is trying to optimize just for today and is not intent on becoming a durable reinvention machine.
I have to ask, side note, you speak about Jeff Bezos. I've read a lot about no PowerPoint meetings. Is that true? What's that all about?
Yeah, it is true. And as you read in Big Bet Leadership, we reverse engineered a lot of that 6-page narrative working backwards approach and designed a specific set of templates and memos and how to debate them for the specific challenge of a major transformation. And so the one appendix in the book is called Why Memos, and it's kind of the research behind why working with memos, both the writing and the debating, is a different way of working. Kevin and I had a major client, a big medical device company, and the EVP of manufacturing, after we kind of helped correct a digital transformation that is off course. And he goes, what's interesting about Big Bet Leadership and your technique is you might evaluate it as like a strategy approach, but it's really a strategy approach with a cultural transformation. And that cultural transformation is how we work together through these things. And you have to do it differently. One of the books that really impacted us was a book called Essentialism by Greg McKeown. And the essence of that book is how to keep the main thing, right? And avoiding everything else. And so working in memos is a way of helping you both think through and then get the best from everybody about a hard problem. None of these are trivial problems that you don't take a big bet on a trivial problem. You only take a big bet on a wicked problem, a really complex situation. That's where value is created. But you have to think through these things so much better than you do a normal operational situation. And that's where these memos are an absolute game changer. It's not easy, but now you have a guide in how to do them.
So related to that, right? Have you seen any difference around the world with this approach cross-culturally? Are there specific parts of the world or types of companies that are more open to this or harder to accept this mode of leadership?
I'm not a highly experienced international advisor, but I would say that the more direct a culture is and the less respectful to kind of seniority and things like that, hierarchy, then the better you're going to be at working in this manner.
Very good, very good. So let's talk about opportunities, right? So let's fast forward. A lot of organizations embrace this type of leadership, this type of thinking. What are the opportunities, especially in this fast moving digital era, for businesses and organizations to thrive? Especially, there's a lot of threats between competition, new technology, if they have this way of thinking and this way of leadership.
You know, there's a quote by Sun Tzu that, in chaos there's opportunity, right? And that's my fundamental belief is it's both a threat and an opportunity. And the hypothesis, the framing of the book is we're not good at transforming, but we're coming into an era where transformation has to become a core capability of senior executives. Like that is the job to be done for senior executives. And the companies that can become that systematic reinvention machine are going to be the ones that capture the opportunity at the detriment of those that can't, right? So that's the general framing on why I think this conversation is really relevant to the era that we are heading into, which is going to be more turbulent and have more of this threat and opportunity to it than the past 25 years of digital transformation. And so I fundamentally believe that business value is created by solving hard problems, by abstracting out the complexity for your customers and solving a hard problem, and doing that in a reinvented manner that creates a cost model advantage relative to doing that. And that's the tension that you have to think through on these is high ambition, big markets, important problems for customers to solve, but realize that, these things are hard to predict. So you have to go about them in a agile, experimental approach.
So let's talk specifics here. Can you walk through an example of maybe a customer you work with or maybe somebody who bought the book that went through this quote unquote transformation, adopting these principles and seeing the benefits of it for their organization?
Yeah. So a number of examples that come through, but oftentimes, these things die the death of 1,000 cuts, right? There's not like one problem that is there, but a couple of the big ones are, first is that they don't actually allocate senior leadership committed to the initiative. And it is a different priority when you actually assign senior leaders to an initiative. So we were working with a medical device manufacturer, and they had a digital transformation going on, and there was nobody in the initiative that was actually full-time committed to the initiative. And so what the adjustment that we made was a senior leader and a small project team that was full-time committed to the initiative. And guess what happened? Clarity rapidly improved. The velocity really improved. Like we started things that would take weeks or months to get done or decided started to take days to get decided. And that's a distinct advantage. Another is that oftentimes companies very much overestimate the impact that something is going to have. It's been oversold, overpromised. And so by working, especially kind of this thinking in outcomes playbook, like let's really understand the problem, let's really understand our hypothesis and the financial case behind it and the risks behind that financial case. So we've helped companies truly understand, like, while this is not a bad idea relative to a portfolio allocation of your resources, we don't think it's going to have nearly the size of impact that you're expecting it to have. And so they reallocated their, portfolio, call it the project portfolio, in a different direction, saving them years and the commitment behind an initiative that was going to suck all the oxygen out of their ability to make change happen and let them allocate it to a much higher impact thesis.
I'm just thinking, right? Like it's very counterculture, frankly, to a lot of how leaders think, a lot of how leaders operate. And how can leaders really, even before they read the book, for some of our listeners, transform themselves to think this way and behave this way? Are there any baby steps they can initially take at a personal level?
Listening to this podcast is a good baby step, but what you're pointing at is the fundamental blindness. And if there's one thing that somebody takes from this conversation here today, which is the skills and the beliefs of being a good operator. I see a problem, I understand how to solve it, I make a plan, and I execute. That's what most of our career and training has been about, is fundamentally different than a high potential, high risk transformation. That's what a big bet is. And if you apply the same approaches and the same beliefs from your operating mindset to your transformation mindset, you will fail. And that is, if you can just understand and believe that you're on the path to adjusting your position and understand, I actually need two playbooks. I need both an operating playbook and, call it an innovation playbook or a transformation playbook or a big bet playbook. Call it anything you want. It's different, fundamentally different. And the confusion is oftentimes, well, we use a lot of the same words in both of those playbooks, right? And so that's where we think a reserved word like a bet or a big bet is really important. Different than a project, different than a proposal, because if you can signify to somebody, a bet is something, I think it's a good idea, but I'm not sure, right? You're indicating that there's risks to it. Then we could go, okay, we're going to use a different playbook for this thing that we're calling a bet versus a project or a proposal. And so if you can have a reserved word for that, then I think that helps the path of having a different playbook for these high potential, high risk situations.
That's very important, right? I think the key to that too is once you have, like you said, clarity on the distinction, the next step is making sure that your peers and the team you're working with has the same playbook. Because if not, it doesn't really matter. You're going to be a lone wolf trying to get this done, and everybody else is operating on the old same playbook as they would do business as usual.
And that's why we wrote Big Bet Leadership. Not that we've captured all of that playbook, but I think we've really started the conversation and given some really important concepts in it so that you can get on the same page and go, okay, this is how we're going to operate over in this sphere, over on these high potential initiatives that we're doing.
Shift Happens Podcast. Shift Happens Podcast.
John, this has been really, really cool conversation. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners are now buying on Amazon your book, right? So before we wrap up, I would love for you to leave insights to our listeners on what are the top 2 or 3 qualities that every leader should possess to drive a lot of these digital transformation initiatives effectively. Because most of our listeners are in the technology space, decision makers. They're responsible for budgets and big bets around transformation in technology.
Yeah, so here's two. One is the concept of being a chief repeating officer. And what one of the key roles of being a leader for a transformation is having the right communication techniques. And it's typically done incorrectly. Incorrect communication is a burning platform style communication. We have to change. Like, we're behind competitively. That actually, it doesn't not only help, it actually hinders because everybody's trying to make meaning behind what we're doing. If you can be a chief repeating officer that uses this big bet vector, here's the problem we're solving, here's our hypothesis for the future state, and here's the journey of testing that we're going to go on, and repeat with meaningful stories to it, it will be clear, it will be consistent, it will be authentic because it's truthful, and it will help your stakeholders actually through that transformation. So that's one specific thing. The second is in a chapter that's called kill, continue, pivot, or confusion. And it's about the high stakes meetings where you're evaluating a situation, your big bet, right? And it's like, well, what do we do? Do we continue? Do we scale it? Do we pull back? But what typically happens is confusion. And as we point out in the chapter, there's no specific rubric or prediction or decision framework that you can apply. But what you have to have is really good hygiene around these meetings. The right hygiene means set them up correctly. Don't do the things you shouldn't do in this meeting, but focus on here's where we're at. Here's where we've learned. Has our big bet vector changed? Yes or no? Do we have more confidence in it, less confidence in it at this point? Don't suffer from all these biases like sunk cost fallacy and essentially falling in love with the idea. If you have good hygiene around it, you will make clear-eyed, independent, best going forward decision. What's our next best available step going forward? And everybody can be successful in this and contribute to it because we're actually setting it up for the right type of conversation. That's good hygiene for this. And what typically happens is kind of the or confusion option out of this, out of these high stakes meetings. So those are two tactical things that you can, kind of start applying today.
100%, and it's actionable for everybody. So, John, thank you so much for your time and for your insights. And again, to all our listeners, I'm sure you can go to Amazon, look for Big Bet Leadership. And John, if folks want to connect with you, learn more about you, where's the best place for people to find you?
Yeah. So LinkedIn is the probably the best place. John Rossman or johnrossman.com. And you can get all these tools we talked about at my business website, which is rossmanpartners.com. But you can read about that in the book.
All right. Well, thank you, John. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Until the next episode, have a fantastic day.
Shift Happens Podcast.
Thank you for listening. John introduced a concept of being a chief repeating officer, where leaders consistently communicate the vision, goals, and progress of transformation initiatives. By embracing big bets, creating clarity, and accelerating risk and value testing, leaders can position their companies for long-term success. Until the next time.